Well, we're in for a real treat tonight. I'm be happy to introduce Mr. Evan Sayet by popular demand. Evan's been here a couple years ago and there was a big response then, and we're glad to have him today. For those of you who don't know him, he's a jack of all trades. He's a comic, he's a screenwriter, he's a political writer, and you'll hear a little bit about that tonight. Also, he is here with his books, Kindergarten Eden, which he'll be selling and signing after the Q&A. So that's a chance for you to maybe share a few words with him as well. Evan was born in New York City, came into this world as a liberal, but then he got cured. So he'll tell you about that, I'm sure, tonight. His big distinction is a broadcast he did for the Heritage Foundation, and we're familiar with that. And it's still one of the five most important conservative talks by Andrew Breitbart, who was also an alum of Conservative Forum, and it's still today the most viewed lecture on their series. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Evan Sayet.
Listen, if I weren't here, the stage would be empty because Nick Adams was supposed to be here. So all of that, we're so happy to have him back. Popular demand. No, Nick Adams couldn't make it. He's got legal troubles. I'm here for you. It is really quite wonderful to be in the Silicon Valley again, a place of such genius, such advanced technology, a place of computer advancement, of aerospace technology, of every single technical advance except apparently air conditioning. I never quite know how to start these talks because having already given a speech to the Heritage Foundation, which in fact remains the single most viewed lecture in their entire history, not Margaret Thatcher, not Ronald Reagan, me. And the reason it became such a popular speech was because I answered a question that boggles all of our minds. It is so easy to dismiss liberals as stupid. It is so easy to dismiss them as evil. But we all know liberals, and we all know liberals who are not stupid and who are not evil. So how is it that we are to explain that the modern liberal is not only always wrong, he is always as wrong can be? That every single one of his beliefs about himself, about human nature, about the world is diametrically opposed to the truth. Why is it that such good, smart, decent, loving, caring people as our colleagues, our friends, our neighbors, our relatives, especially if you're a Jew, then every relative, gets it so wrong? And in that lecture that I gave to the Heritage Foundation, it's funny. Almost instantly afterwards, I started to receive emails, and I would say honestly maybe 20 or 25 separate individuals said to me something along the lines of, do you know what you have there? You've got the unified field theory of liberalism. Once you understand what it is that you said in this talk, you understand everything about how the modern liberal thinks and why he invariably sides with evil over good, wrong over right, ugly over beautiful, profane over profound, failure over success at every single turn. It's funny, in that original speech I gave as examples, now remember that speech is almost 10 years old, it'll be 10 years old in March. I gave as examples, give the modern liberal the choice between Saddam Hussein and the United States. He will not only side with Saddam Hussein, but he will viciously slander America and Americans in order to do so. Remember, they called him General Betray Us. Back in that original talk, I was able to give as an example, give the modern liberal the choice between the vicious, mass-murdering, corrupt terrorist dictator Yasser Arafat and that tiny and wonderful democracy of Israel. He will plagiarize maps, falsify documents, and engage in one blood libel after another, as Jimmy Carter did in his despicable book, Peace, Not Apartheid, as if Israel's an apartheid state. Quite literally, nothing could be further from the truth. Back in that original talk I gave as an example, give the modern liberal the choice between promoting childhood abstinence and childhood promiscuity. He will use his movies, his TV shows, the schools to promote promiscuity and actually make fun of and belittle the virgin. In fact, there is a leftist organization, I'm going to space on its name for just a moment, but not for very long, a pro-abortion group masquerading as a pro-choice group that held a fundraiser called F Abstinence. And by the way, it wasn't just F, it was the entire word, because vulgarizing society is part of the modern liberal agenda. When I then wrote the book, The Kindergarten of Eden, How the Modern Liberal Thinks, I was able to give examples that didn't yet exist, but I was able to predict. For example, give Barack Obama the choice between who to bow down to and who not to bow down to. He bowed down to the despotic Saudi king. He bowed down to the Japanese imperialist emperor. But he didn't bow to the Queen of England. Give the modern liberal the choice. If you look at every place that a revolution has cropped up across the globe during his tenure, every single time he has sided with evil over good. Whether it was siding with the mullahs in Iran when the Green Revolution started, whether it was siding against Hosni Mubarak, an ally of America, a man who had kept the peace in the Middle East for 30 years. He sided with a leftist coup to overthrow a democratically elected ally in Honduras. Well, since I wrote the book, I can give you more and more and more examples, such as this president spreading the lie that Michael Brown's hands were up. That Michael Brown wasn't a thug who was high on drugs, who punched the cop in the face, took his gun and tried to kill him. The president knows his hands weren't up. He knows that this is a lie that he is spreading, and this lie is going to result in dead cops. And yet this president sides with the lie over and over and over again, and the question becomes why? And that is something I answer in that original talk. It's something I answer more succinctly and better in my book, because you can edit a book, whereas you can't edit a speech. It just comes out of your mouth. In order for me to go on and tell you more, because I'm just repeating now some of the things my fans in the audience and those of you who know me already know, it's important that you understand these two laws of the universal field theory of liberalism. The first, I'm going to give it to you as it's written in the book, and then I'll explain. The first law is that the modern liberal, that's anybody born after World War II and getting worse with each successive generation, the modern liberal was raised to believe that indiscriminateness is a moral imperative because its opposite is discrimination. In the 1980s, by no coincidence, when the first babies born after World War II became the children of the 60s, became the professors and the journalists and the entertainers and the Democratic Party of the 80s, in the 1980s, thinking was outlawed. It was deemed by the left to be a hate crime, an act so vicious as to be avoided by all good people and reviled when seen practiced by others. The thinking behind the outlawing of thinking was this: anything that you believe, anything that I believe, anything that anybody believes is going to have been so tainted by your prejudices we all have, prejudices we can't help but have, prejudices based on such things as the color of your skin, the nation of your ancestry, your height, your weight, your sex, and so on. Anything that you believe is going to be so tainted by your bigotries that the only way not to be a bigot is to never think at all. It's actually the second law of the unified field theory of liberalism that's the most essential. I'll give it to you as it's written in the book, and then I'll explain. Indiscriminateness of thought does not lead to indiscriminateness of beliefs. Indiscriminateness of thought leads invariably and inevitably. There is no place else it has ever led or could ever lead but deciding with evil over good, wrong over right, ugly over beautiful, profane over profound, and failure over success. Why? Because if nothing, if no culture, if no religion, if no form of governance, if no family structure, if nothing is better than anything else, then success is unjust. Why should a person, a culture, a nation, a religion, a peoples, why should something succeed if it's not better than anything else? For exactly the same reason, to the open-minded, failure, as proved by nothing other than the fact that it has failed, is proof positive that somehow the failure has been victimized. After all, why should a person, a culture, a nation, a religion, why should anything fail if it's not worse than anything else? And then just by extension, the greater the success and the greater the failure, the greater the injustice. And exceptional success and exceptional failure is an exceptional injustice which social justice demands. They punish the exceptionally successful, and they reward and elevate and work on behalf of the exceptionally evil and failed. They don't hate Israel. They don't pick Israel out as the one nation on the entire planet. Not Cuba. Cuba they'll have nice relations with. Not Iran. Iran they'll release money and encourage them to build a bomb. The one nation on the entire planet that the Democrats want to strangle to death economically through boycott, divestment, sanctions, is the tiny liberal democracy of Israel. Why? It's not because Israel is bad, it's because Israel is good. In fact, Israel is exceptionally good. And this goodness is proved in a million ways, including success. Israel has these skyscrapers in Tel Aviv. Israel has these world-class symphony orchestras. Israel has these Nobel Prize-winning physicists. Well, if the Jewish culture is nothing special, how do you explain their exceptional success? To the modern liberal, their exceptional success is all the proof they need of their exceptional evil. But the liberal has a problem. Israel isn't exceptionally evil. America isn't exceptionally evil. So what do? They have to invent lies. Lies. One of them is that we're a racist nation, and that's why the president lies about Michael Brown. It's not that there is racism in America. It's that Democrats need for there to be racism in America, because if there isn't racism in America, then there is no Democratic Party. And so when they can't find any actual racism, what do? They say, well, it's institutionalized. What does that mean? Tell the Jews of Germany it was institutionalized. Tell the people around the globe who've lived through real racism, it was institutionalized. And even then, it's obviously a lie, because every single institution in America, by law, must favor blacks. So they say, well, it's not really institutionalized, but it's spoken in secret code. You didn't really say it, but I know the code you're using. And when you ask them to decipher the code, they can't decipher the code, because there is no code. It's a lie. So they say, so I'm not really secret code. The reason nobody can hear any actual racism is because it's spoken in dog whistle. The racism, here's how you know there's racism in America. When you can't hear it, you know it's there. Meanwhile, while they take everything we say and interpret it through their secret code and the dog whistle, so it's things we didn't say, but how they interpreted it, when actual hate is spoken, like when the mass murder of those 49 gay dancers at the club in Orlando were shot dead by an Islamic racist, they redacted his 911 call. They changed the wording of what he actually said. So here you have it again. Tear down and lie about the people who are good, lie about the people who are bad in their favor, because that's what Democrats have to do. Because if you don't lie against the good, and if you don't lie in favor of the evil, then this idea that everything is equally right disappears. It just disappears. So I want to introduce you to a trick that liberals used linguistically to change everything that is good and flip it on its head 180 degrees so that their lies become the truth. What they do is they take important concepts like truth, like justice, and they insert a modifier before the word that changes the meaning of that word 180 degrees. See, you and I, because we're grown-ups, because we're human beings, because we understand how the world really works, we know how important it is to be correct. To be correct in our facts, to be correct in our thinking, to be correct in our reasoning, to be correct in our conclusions. Because without being correct, then you can't make things better. We know how important it is to be correct, but since the modern liberal is never correct in his facts, in his reasoning, in his conclusions, he inserts the modifier politically before the word correct, and he spins the meaning of the word 180 degrees, where speaking the truth is now an act of evil, and only lying is true. The modern liberal is an enemy of justice. He despises the concept of justice. Justice to all good, smart, loving, decent people means the closest possible wedding of behaviors to consequences. The closest possible wedding of choices to reward. Fair enough? But the modern liberal doesn't believe in the individual. He believes in skin color because he's a racist. He believes people are defined by their race. Black lives matter. White privilege. La raza, which means the race. She's a wise Latina. We don't speak like that. They're the racists. And because the liberal despises the concept of individual justice, he inserts the modifier social before the word justice, and he flips the meaning of the word justice 180 degrees. Now justice demands that a thug like Michael Brown be honored in Ferguson. There's actually a plaque in the honor of this drug-addled career criminal who had just strong-armed a good, decent businessman and tried to murder a cop, and the Democrats honor him. Because while justice might not have said he needed to be killed, there was no injustice in his being killed. But social justice demands that it be turned 180 degrees on its head. Liberals need for there to be racism and aggression against the black community. But none exists. It's a lie. Every one of the ideas that blacks are gunned down by evil white cops is a vicious, disgusting lie. It's a lie. And by the way, the President of the United States knows this, and everybody at Black Lives Matter knows this, and George Soros, who's paying this, knows this. It's all an attempt to rile racial hatred in an attempt to destroy Western civilization, which they hate because of our success. But there is no actual aggression against blacks in America. So they insert the modifier micro before the word aggression, and it's 180 degrees from what aggression means. Outright violence, oppression, versus, oh, you said something that might be interpreted by a Harvard law professor as being something that might trigger a bad feeling in that person. So the racism of our words can't actually be heard. They're dog whistles. The aggression of our actions can't actually be seen. You need a microscope. And yet America is the most racist nation in the history of the world, and cops deserve to be murdered according to the Democratic Party mindset. One of my favorite examples of the insertion of and you know what, can I get some water? Is this mine? Perfect. So you actually anticipated my needs. This is why your forum is a place there to Dinesh. Question for you. I thank you. Question for you. Before we introduce your speaker tonight, let me tell you what's coming up. Dinesh D'Souza, that's a special event. Everybody except me was a special event. My favorite example of liberals inserting a modifier before a word came from a book by a gentleman named Danny Goldberg. Danny Goldberg is scum. He's a liberal. His claim to fame, besides being born into a rich family, was that he started. I can't remember. It wasn't Arista Records, and I don't want to besmirch a good record label by getting the wrong name. But he started a record label that became rich and famous for him by promoting gangster rap and selling it to young children. In fact, there was a moment where it was so obvious how vicious and disgusting and vile this selling of this filth for profit by this Democrat was, that this truly evil, horrible woman, I mean, just an absolute Nazi, her name was Tipper Gore, went to see Danny Goldberg, and also at that meeting was a gentleman named Michael Mann, who made his money in movies and television doing the same thing that Goldberg was doing, promoting violence and vulgarity to children via his movies and his TV shows. And they got to talking, and if you remember, I know you guys remember the story, that all she asked was, can you do the mothers and fathers of America a favor? I know you're making a fortune. I don't think this is going to take $1 out of your pocket, Danny. Can you just put a warning label on some of the more vile and vicious and disgusting and hateful music that you're selling to our children? Just help us parents out. We can't listen to everything our kids get. Can you help us out by just putting a warning label so parents can protect their children? And of course, that made her a Nazi. It made her a fascist. It made her Joseph McCarthy. You remember how they came after their own. And we're talking about Joe Lieberman, who was the vice presidential nominee, and Tipper Gore, who would have been the first lady. And they went after her like she was Adolf Hitler for asking for a label. You know how that's what liberals do. If you ask, you're a Nazi, you're a fascist, you're a Hitler. And at one point, Michael Mann said something that Goldberg found and I hate the fact that he has a Jewish name, Goldberg. I hate it. But he said something that Goldberg found so brilliant that he not only thought it was brilliant when it was said, but 10 years later when he wrote his autobiography, a book called How the Left Lost Teen Spirit, a book that in its own title acknowledges that they're children, teen, and that their ideology is spirit, not intellect. By his own admission, How the Left Lost Teen Spirit. Michael Mann said this, and this is what Goldberg found brilliant. He said, Ms. Gore, I do believe there are 3 kinds of violence. There's the cartoon violence, which is what we grew up with, where you don't see the consequences of the violence. Daffy Duck's head gets blown off, and the next minute his head's back on. He said, then there's a realistic portrayal of violence. That's what Danny and I try to do. And then he said, but then there's the worst kind of violence of all. It is so ridiculous, I'm going to give you guys a moment to try to even ponder what it could be. It was the psychic violence of the Bill Cosby Show. Because black children would see a white family with a father in the home and successful and happy and just a collection of people instead of black people, that it would cause their heads to explode in the ghetto. And there was no actual violence. In fact, there couldn't be anything less violent than the Bill Cosby Show. It was ridiculous. It was less violent than Leave It to Beaver. but it was psychically violent. And that's what liberals do, is they insert a modifier before a concept that switches that concept, like truth, like justice, like violence, like everything, 180 degrees. Because the modern liberal is not only always wrong, he is always as wrong can be. Always. Always. I just want to talk about a couple more linguistic concepts, and then what I think I'd like to do is take questions from the audience. Yes, fair enough? Liberals love the concept of diversity. But the problem is, diversity is a meaningless word. It just means different. If we let people in here who wet their pants, we'd be a more diverse group. Difference without critical judgment is not a good thing. In fact, it's a bad thing. Because what made America great was the concept of the melting pot. That we came here with our myriad cultures, our myriad practices, our myriad beliefs, and what was great about the various ones were embraced by all of us. And what was bad about those cultures that made those people leave their lands. And think about what it takes to leave your homeland. To leave everyone you know. Chances are, at least in many of these places, leave everything you own. To traverse continents. To come to a place where you don't speak the language, where you don't know anyone, where you don't have any financial support. And yet, when they would come to this country, they would leave behind what was evil, embrace what was good, and benefit us all by bringing some of that good here. That was what the melting pot was. And what happened was the better behaviors became the more common behaviors. So now, if you're seeking diversity, what you are doing is you're saying, let's eliminate those common behaviors. That's not diverse, that's common. And instead, let's replace them with lesser behaviors, lesser choices. So diversity devoid of critical judgment is not our strength, it's our weakness. Without critical judgment, you will inevitably and by definition promote the lesser. Meanwhile, those bad behaviors that were burned out by the melting pot and have become uncommon, well, now they become the things to promote, because in order to be more diverse, you need to have more of those bad behaviors. I know that I need to think through that argument a little bit better. But at least you can say you were the first to hear it. All right. Please buy my book, The Kindergarten of Eden, How the Modern Liberal Thinks. I do believe it is the definitive explanation as to why so many good, decent, loving, caring, generous people are just so wrong, so completely wrong, so totally wrong all of the time. There's another linguistic concept. Liberals love to say that they are more nuanced than we are. Right? Don't they love that word? They love the word nuance. But they're really not. They don't mean that they are capable of seeing subtle differences between things. What it really is a rejection of our recognition of good and evil. Because we recognize things as good and evil, well, I'm more nuanced than that. I know that the evil really isn't totally evil. The reality is, so do we. When we say things like Saddam Hussein was evil, or Mother Teresa was good, we assume we're speaking to adults who recognize we get that in the fallen world of man, nothing is 100% anything. When we say Saddam Hussein was evil, we get that he may have loved puppy dogs. We get that Adolf Hitler may have opened the door for Eva and brought her flowers on the anniversary of Kristallnacht. We understand. One of the best Kristallnacht jokes you'll ever hear. It's a given to us. We what we mean when we say Adolf Hitler or Saddam Hussein were evil was not that they were purely evil, but that their good did not significantly mitigate their evil. When we say that Mother Teresa was good, we understand she may have once passed gas and blamed it on the dog. One of the best Mother Teresa passing gas jokes you'll ever hear. But what we understand, what the liberal means by their more nuances, they deny the existence of good, they deny the existence of evil, and in fact they declare you evil for recognizing the existence of good and evil. So once again, they have flip-flopped everything 180 degrees. Guys, I just think I'm going to do better if I take your questions. You guys, how am I doing? Am I doing okay? And I am so pleased that so many of my friends, my friend Mickey Joseph, the amazing stand-up comedian from San Francisco, came down to see me tonight. Mickey, I've known Mickey since the very first day that I stood online as a stand-up comedian to try to get 5 minutes at the... And Mickey's a liberal. My friend Christopher Blinn is here somewhere. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. But forgive me, guys, most importantly to me, my daughter-in-law, Dana Sayet, is here tonight. Yay. And that means the world to me. All right, so I do think, if it's okay with you, I'll take questions and I'll try to expand and expound upon my points.
All right, we'll start out with a little bit of maybe humor. Did you hear that today in Dallas, the president said that today on the street it's easier to buy a Glock than a book? Do you think he knows what a Glock is?
Do you think he knows what a book is?
Okay. Well, this is more serious. Maybe you can you certainly have a good perspective of it. Why do you think Ted Cruz did not catch fire with the public?
I think way to answer this that might be a better way to answer this is, why did Donald Trump? Because anybody who says, and my friends try to convince me all the time, Donald Trump is not a conservative. I know that. I don't think he's fooled any evangelicals into thinking that he's going to ask himself, what would Jesus do before he pursues policy? This idea that he has fooled us is ridiculous. What has happened is this. There is a concept, it's a moral exercise, and actually it's sometimes real world experience. It's called the ticking time bomb scenario. Under this scenario, you've captured a terrorist mastermind with knowledge about an imminent future attack. You don't believe in torture. You're not even sure that it works. But you do know you don't have time to go through the usual protocol of taking weeks and months and years to try to win the terrorist trust. Your only hope is to torture. And I think that's the way they see Donald Trump. I think they see Donald Trump as the Jack Bauer. You know what? Do what you have to do. Do what you have to do. We don't have 4 or 8 more years of open borders. We don't have 4 or 8 more years of liberals planting Islamists around the country. We don't have 4 or 8 more years of the moral rot and the intellectual rot in our schools and on our streets. You know what, Donald? Do what you have to do.
This question has to do with your statements on the language. What are the best ways we can stop and reverse this language manipulation which erodes our freedom?
Yeah, look, there's the macro and there's the micro. In the macro, we have to take back our schools. We have to take back the institutions that the liberals use to brainwash, indoctrinate, and turn our children into anti-American haters. All right, that's something that I have, but I don't want to discuss in a public forum. But in the micro, I have a program I call Adopt a Democrat. All right, the good news is that America is not divided in two. We're divided in three. There are those of us who get it, that the better does exist, and that America is not only better, but we're exceptional. And we seek to conserve the things that make America exceptional, which, by the way, are liberal values, lowercase l. What we seek to conserve is a liberal democracy, lowercase letters. It's the liberals who are fascists. It's the liberals who are anti-liberal. It's the liberals who are against free speech. It's the liberals who are against a merit-based society. All right, so there are those of us who get it, and we seek to conserve those values, which is why we're called conservatives. Then there are those all the way on the other side who unfortunately are overrepresented in media, in education, and academia. They're the Rosie O'Donnells of the world who just hate America, and there's nothing you can do. But there's a whole bunch in the middle, and I swear to you, I am convinced it's the majority of the people who still vote Democrat, who don't hate America, who don't believe the cops are racist, evil murderers, who don't believe abortion as a profit center is a good thing, who have just never heard from a conservative what a conservative believes. Where would they have heard it? On their nightly news? Where would they have heard it? In their universities? Where would they have heard it? In the messages in the movies? Where would they have heard it? So you need to find one person in your life, just one. And it has to be somebody in your life. Because it's so easy for the Democrat to dismiss me. Oh, he's a Nazi, he's a fascist, he's a Hitler. But it's a little bit harder to dismiss you when you're their blood relative and they love you. When you're their neighbor for 40 years and they know how good you are. Find one person in your life who isn't a hate America always Democrat, who just votes Democrat because they're convinced that we're evil because the Democrats tell them that we're evil. And here's the key. It is very much like raising a child. That's why I call it Adopt a Democrat. Because they truly are moral, intellectual, and emotional children. It's why my book is called, the book you're all going to buy, right? The book is called The Kindergarten of Eden, How the Modern Liberal Thinks. And just like with raising a child, you do not make everything a teachable moment. That's a mistake that we make. We are so well aware of how right we are, how logical, how overwhelmingly obvious is the truth that they just don't buy. That we think if we just tell them the truth, tell them they'll come to our side. No, it's like raising a child. You don't make everything a teachable moment, but when they say something egregious, when they say something like, I can't believe that guy made that video that got the ambassador killed. That's the moment, like when your child runs into the street, that you spank them. And then move on to something else. And over the course of time, it may take 5 years, it may take 7 years, it may take 10 years. But over the course of time, you will change people. I've changed people. I've changed Jews.
Wow.
And keep this in mind. If every one of us changes just one person, we double our numbers. Okay, I don't know what to do. This lady has her hand up, and you, what do we have?
We're not doing questions that way. We're doing questions through cards, so I apologize to her, but this is the way everyone else playing by the rules. Oh, she needs a card. Oh, okay, very good. Our ushers are coming.
And I'll answer your question anyway later, because I cheat.
Yeah. Oh, this is.
Just call me Clinton.
I think we just you answered this one, but it's a very well written question. It seems that liberals often shame those who disagree with them by describing any dissent as bigotry. How can we help young people resist succumbing to the fear of being labeled a bigot?
You know what? There's actually power to be found in how ubiquitous is the slander. You know what? There's a sign at Tea Party gatherings that I love so much. It says, "It doesn't matter what this sign says, you'll still say it's racist." Well, so long as it doesn't matter what it says, then say the truth. You know, they're going to call you a racist no matter what, because that's all they have. All the Democrats have is hate. What they need to do is this. They need to convince the black community, the Hispanic community. They need to say, well, of course we've stolen all the money from your cities in Detroit. And of course we have kept you impoverished for the 50 years we've been in control. But vote for us because they want to send you back to slavery. That's all they have, is to inspire the belief that we hate. Because without hate, there is no Democratic Party.
Will be interesting. If liberals hate success, why are they so anxious to earn huge sums of money, like $350,000 for one speech by Bill Clinton, or Michelle Obama spending huge sums of money on trips?
Well, one of the reasons they hate success is that you evil people might use it to promote evil. They know that they're good, so they're going to use their money to promote good. So they exempt themselves. Hillary Clinton, nobody cares how filthy rich she is because she has a D next to her name. You know, one of the things that Democrats, the industries that we associate with liberalism all have in common is that they're all talk, but there's no action. Every one of the professions, academia, the professor who has never run a business lectures to children who have never run a business about how evil all the businessmen are. The reporter who has never been a doctor will report about how evil the pharmaceutical companies are to the people who have never run a pharmaceutical company. It is so telling that the person, I'm talking about the actor, who pretends to be a soldier votes Democrat, while the actual soldier votes Republican.
Yeah.
And because Democrats don't do anything, all they do is talk. They know that nothing they do causes any problems. You know, when you're a soldier, you might accidentally kill a civilian. What an evil, horrible thing that soldier is. But when you're an actor pretending to be a soldier, nothing ever goes wrong. So they know that they're good because they never do anything wrong. When you're a reporter reporting on the pharmaceutical industry, your drugs never have an unintended consequence because you don't make drugs. And so the liberals are convinced, because since they don't do anything wrong, they think their own riches are not a threat, whereas the riches of the people who do things are a threat. It's very interesting. In a utopia, which is where we live right now. That's why it's called the Kindergarten of Eden, how the modern liberal thinks. Think about this, because this is profound. And I don't mean it's a profound thought, though it is. I mean, it's profound in its importance. We are the only people in all of human history, maybe the Garden of Eden, maybe. Didn't matter what era you lived in, didn't matter what geographical place you lived in, didn't matter your riches. Every human being until us had to worry about communicable diseases. The modern liberal is raised in an era where there are no communicable diseases. They've never known them. Polio vanquished, smallpox vanquished, chickenpox vanquished, measles vanquished. The flu, which had not all that long ago wiped out 2/3 of a Western culture, is now a 3-day paid vacation. Hunger, which every human being in the history of the world had to at least recognize, if not suffer through, is non-existent in America. In fact, hunger is so non-existent that if you stand on a street corner and beg for $1, you can then go and buy a Thanksgiving-like feast of turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, gravy, peas, corn, and an apple cobbler by going to the 99-cent store and buying a TV dinner. And when you live in paradise, when you live in a place where none of these things exist, you know what happens? The evil is no longer those things. The evil are the people who keep those things at bay. If there is no war, then the evil is the soldier. If there is no crime, then the evil is the cop. If there is no illness, then the evil is the pharmaceutical company. If there is no hunger, then the evil is Monsanto. I just rant.
Nice. Actually, it's very good. There was actually a few questions along that theme, so I'd like to acknowledge the audience. A lot of great minds were thinking alike. There were several questions that were related to that. So
and all these great minds are thinking about buying my book, right?
That's it, right? I can see that right now. See the wheels turning.
Hi, by the way, this is the second time I'm here, and I sold a lot of books last time I was here. How many of you have read my book? Would you do me a favor? I'm going to turn around, stick my fingers in my ears, tell them how great it is.
Great book. That's a great book. Okay.
That wasn't
was fun.
overwhelming. That scared me. Okay.
All right. How would you counter moral equivalence? We know that's a trope of the left.
Right. I think what you have to do is just continue to point out that there isn't a moral equivalence. That covering half your population in baggies like the Islamists do is not morally equivalent to women having freedom like the Israelis do. You just have to have the courage to speak up. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult because you will lose friends. If you're in my industry, you'll lose jobs because liberals will try to destroy you if you dare to disagree with them. But you know what? This is our war. Every generation has had to go to war. World War I was horrific. World War II was horrific. This war for American survival only requires that you have the courage to speak up. There's really not that much being asked of you by comparison. Yeah, it hurts. It hurts. You know, it hurts to lose friends, and it certainly hurts to lose jobs. But this is war.
That's a good perspective. Well, you're a Hollywood kind of guy. The question.
No, I'm not a Hollywood kind of guy.
Hollywood guy. The question here is Bill Cosby being targeted by the left?
Oh, I don't think so. No, I think that he got, I don't know. It's a pending court case that I really don't know very much about. But I will say the preponderance of evidence in the court of public opinion does not look very good for the man. You know? No, I don't even know how to entertain that question.
Okay, that's
Sorry.
fine. And I don't know if you consider yourself an expert on Donald Trump, but this question is, do you think Trump will be able to articulate some of your concepts in the presidential debates and discussions?
I've waited to hear him articulate anything. And listen, there are times when he has an odd speaking style where he starts to speak and then he's speaking about that and then he's speaking about that, and I don't even know. I do know that we have a choice between somebody we know hates America and somebody we know hates Western civilization, somebody we know is going to continue the open border policies where people who want to murder us are going to be not only let in, but then given sanctuary. Where is the sanctuary for American citizens? This notion that the governor of the state of California puts the protection of illegal aliens over the protection of California citizens, which is his fiduciary responsibility. That's what he's elected for. That's his job. The fact that the president of the United States puts the well-being of Islamic fascists over the well-being of our children. At this point, that's what this election is about. You know, it's funny. This is such a different talk, but it's such an important talk. After World War II, it was rightly understood that we as a civilization had to do everything in our powers to make sure nothing like national socialism ever occurred again. And the leftists took advantage of this to convince the world that the problem was nationalism. It wasn't. It was socialism. Nationalism has no moral value one way or the other. It depends on what nation you love. If you love an evil nation, then nationalism is evil. If you love a great nation, then nationalism is great. But socialism is always evil. And it was socialism, and in fact, I argue in an upcoming paper that international socialism is even more dangerous than national socialism ever was, because it doesn't have the bulwark of nationalism to stand up against it. See, yeah, the nationalism in Nazi Germany was bad, but thank God the British were nationalists. Thank God the British were patriots. Because if they weren't, then they wouldn't have had either the mandate or the perm to stand up against the onslaught. Why? Great Britain's nothing special. Thank God Americans were nationalists, patriots. And we stood up to the evils of socialism's big sister, communism, during the Cold War. If we weren't patriotic, if we didn't love America, if we didn't recognize American exceptionalism, then we would have given in to the Soviet Union, the most murderous communism, the most murderous ideology in all of human history. So now the evil of socialism without the bulwark of nationalism is even more dangerous than the Nazis ever were. Not as evil as they were, but they don't need to be, because they don't have the time constraint that Hitler had of being up against nationalist nations and patriotic nations. They can take their time, so they don't need Leni Riefenstahl. They've got Steven Spielberg.
Wow.
They don't need this nonstop propaganda. They've got, what's the guy from The Bourne Identity? Matt Damon. All right, they don't need, because they've got time. They don't need to round up the Jews and gas them. The Jews are already in the ghetto in Israel, and just help Iran get a bomb. The comparisons between international socialism and national socialism are stunning and frightening. You know, the communists judged people by their class, by their financial status. So do the Democrats. The one percenters, they're evil. They've got the evil one percenters. The Nazis judged people by race. So do the Democrats. So do the Democrats. It's not since Hitler that people have been judged by a percentage of blood in their veins. Oh, you're 132nd Jew, gas chamber. Oh, you're 132nd Indian, Harvard tenure. Nope, it's not the same. It's not the same, but the concept that you are judged by your skin color, by your income, and by the blood in your veins are all the evils of socialism, whether it was National Socialism or today's international socialism. And I'm a comedian.
Wow. Okay, well, we're gonna lighten it up with the next question.
Okay.
As a comedian, do you see humor in the current elections? And someone wants to know why you're not running.
All right, here's why I'm not running. I would be an outstanding candidate. I would be the world's worst legislator. I can't stand sitting through Robert's Rules of Order and parliamentary and nonsense and just the minutiae. It would kill me. This sounds like a joke, but it really isn't. One of the reasons I became a stand-up comedian is because I can't sit down. You'll notice I didn't join you at the table earlier because I can't sit down. So the notion of sitting there day in and day out listening to that crap.
All right. Well, it was just a matter of time. We have 3 individual questions here that you knew it was coming.
How come
Evan?
nobody's asking if I'm single?
Oh, well, I don't know. Maybe that's still in the deck. Tell us about liberals, Democrats, and Jewish people and why they're... What's your theory of why they're liberal and Democrat?
It's not my theory, it's my explanation. All right. It's a simple answer, but not a short one, so bear with me and stick with me. In order to call yourself a Jew or to be identified as a Jew is different than any other religion that's out there. In order to be called or to call yourself a Christian, all right, you've just voted, you come out, ABC News says who'd you vote for and what's your demographic, and you say, I'm a Christian. It means that you believe something. It means that you believe that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior. To call yourself a Christian means you believe Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior. If you believe that, then there are certain rites and rituals, practices and behaviors, ideologies, ways of thinking that tend to follow. To call yourself a Muslim, you have to believe something. You have to believe that the Quran is the final testament of God and Muhammad is his perfect messenger. If you believe that, you're a Muslim. If you don't believe that, you're not a Muslim. If you do believe that there are certain rites and rituals, practices, behaviors, ways of thinking, lessons you've learned that tend to lead to certain beliefs. But to call yourself a Jew, you don't have to believe anything. To call yourself a Jew, all you have to have done is plopped out of a Jewish womb. Let's call these Jews the plopping Jews. And by the way, Dennis Prager calls them the non-Jewish Jews. They themselves call themselves secular Jews. And you've never heard that for any other religion. I'm a secular Muslim. I'm a secular Christian. You've never heard of such a thing. All right, and unfortunately, those plopping Jews, the non-Jewish Jews, the secular Jews, are the vast majority of Jews in America. And to assume that they would have any morals, any values, because they were born to a Jewish mother is actually an act of bigotry. Because you're not defined by the accidents of your birth, the things you can't control. You're defined by the choices that you make. And they made a choice not only they didn't choose to be Jewish, they chose not to be Jewish. So the idea that this group would be moral, decent, or in any way reflect Jewish culture, Jewish religion, Jewish practice is just, there's no reason to believe that. I mean, what makes Steven Spielberg a Jew? That he's got a big nose? Right? What makes Barbara Streisand a Jew? She's got curly hair. What by practice, religion, beliefs, exercise makes these people Jews? All right, now the remainder of the Jews fall into three categories in ascending order of actual practice by choices that they made to be Jewish. There's the next largest group, which are the Reform Jews. Right? Some Jews, help me with this.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. The only difference between a Reform Jew and a plopping Jew is the Reformed Jew did one thing Jewish by choice in his entire life. All right? The plopping Jew did nothing by choice. It was just an accident. The Reformed Jew did one thing Jewish by choice. Anybody know what it was?
Bar mitzvah.
No, I wouldn't say bar mitzvah. He's still too young. He joined a synagogue. But he didn't join a synagogue to better learn and better practice Judaism. He joined the synagogue because it was the local recreation center. It was a place where he could go where he might meet somebody who thinks Marvin Hamlish looks good. And by the way, in fairness, let me give you my Jewish upbringing. I've become more appreciative of Judaism. I've become more knowledgeable about Judaism. I wish I practiced it more and better than I do. But my Jewish upbringing very much was a plopping Jew. My Jewish upbringing consisted of 3 days. 3 days. At the age of 8 days...
We know that one.
People I barely met a week ago took a knife to me. They were so proud of what they had done, they invited the neighbors over for cake. 12 years and 357 days later, I said words in a language I didn't understand. And 10 years after that, I stepped on a glass and I was married. That was the entirety of my Jewish upbringing. So why in the world would I have Jewish values? Why would I vote for Jewish things? Because let me tell you this. Modern liberalism, which is the dominant ideology of the Democratic Party, is the antithesis of Judaism. And if you look at the voting records, there is a direct horizontal line, direct correlation. As the Jew is more of a Jew, the less he votes Democrat. So the non-Jewish Jew overwhelmingly votes Democrat. The Reformed Jew significantly votes Democrat. The conservative Jew, about half and half, and the Orthodox Jew almost never votes Democrat. Why? Because modern liberalism is the antithesis of Judaism. The gift of the Jews was the concept of justice. As much as this is misrepresented, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, it was not a call for vengeance. It was the first time in human history that the law said the punishment shall not exceed the crime. You know, it used to be if you stepped on the Pharaoh's toe, he killed your family. But in this unfortunately over-poetic passage, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, it says no. Whatever the wrong that was done to you, the punishment shall not exceed the crime. The gift of the Jews was justice. But as I pointed out earlier, the modern liberal despises the concept of justice, which is why he inserts the modifier social justice and champions the lie of Michael Brown.
Okay, that's great. Please.
So hold on a second. Dana, you're going to tell my son I got applause, right?
Yes. There are two separate questions, but they're somewhat related. I think we know your answer to the first one. We'd like you to talk about Black Lives Matter, and sort of the flip of that, or related to that, talk about cultural appropriation.
Well, there you go again with the insertion of the modifier. There's no actual appropriation. There's no land appropriation. There's no property appropriation. There's cultural appropriation, which is 180 degrees. In fact, cultural appropriation used to be called the melting pot. It used to be called actually appreciation and love for another culture. I love that part of your culture. I'm going to embrace it. Liberals have used that love and turned it into hate and turned it into a crime because, again, without hate, there is no Democratic Party.
Okay. A couple more here. Sort of along those lines, we believe in a melting pot. I think it's a positive thing. Could you give your thoughts on admitting Syrian refugees?
Yeah, I am torn on the issue because if you don't allow Syrian refugees, then the people who actually need refuge, the Christians. You'll notice that Barack Obama doesn't let in any Christians, he only lets in the Islamists. But it's not the Islamists who are under siege and genocide in the Middle East. It's, of course, the Christians. Once again, the modern liberals are 180 degrees, siding with evil over good, wrong over right. So I don't want to bar all Syrian refugees. And I really don't have a problem with delaying the admission of Islamists until we have some sort of way to identify what their affiliation is, why they're here. And it's funny because you look at them and they really don't seem like people who need refuge. They seem like people who really would like some more welfare checks, but they really don't seem like people whose lives are endangered, who are dragging their last belongings. In fact, chances are they're on their cell phone playing Pokemon Go.
Here's a scary.
Look at how hip I am.
Here's a scary thought. Do you think Obama's goal was to declare martial law?
I certainly do not discount it. I do know that Obama's goal is a race riot in America. I do know it's the destruction of Western civilization. I know that he has. You know, and I don't know why this is so hard to believe. After all, William Ayres wanted the destruction of America. In fact, he participated in the murder of people. When asked in retrospect what he thought of what he had done, he said, I only wish I had done more. I mean, the idea that these liberals don't hate America when they constantly make clear, kind of reminds me of, I can't figure out the motive of the Orlando killer. I can't figure out, well, he told you, he called 911. He said, I'm killing in the name of Allah. I can't figure it out. What could it be? Obama has made clear that he despises Western civilization. And his every act has been to support the enemies of Western civilization and to weaken every one of our allies.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, we'll have a couple more because we have books to sell.
Hey, listen. I'm a conservative in the Silicon Valley. I've got nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Keep the questions coming.
That's very good. When you're at war, you attack energy, water, food, supply lines. The questioner wants to know, is that what the Democrats are attacking with global warming, Monsanto, coal?
Yes, there's absolutely no doubt that global warming is a farce. All right, global warming. I do believe that global warming is man-made, and that man is Al Gore. And the truth is, if liberals themselves really believed that global warming was real, then why aren't they outraged at the lifestyle that Al Gore lives? This is a man who flies private jets all around the globe, who has caravans of SUVs that actually leave their air conditioning on while he gives hour-long speeches, collects $1 million, because when he gets back to the car, he wants it to be in his comfort zone. This is not a man who is showing that he thinks there's global warming. And of course, global warming is just an invention designed to strangle the productivity of the West. And proof positive of it is when they came out with the Kyoto Protocols. They didn't call for every nation to lower their carbon footprint. It was just a socialist move where successful nations had to be punished, but the failed nations could continue to pollute. You know what? If they really thought that there was a catastrophe, and I will point out one other subtle thing, but in Hollywood, if they really believe the oceans are rising, why do they all live on the beach?
That's true. Good point. So maybe to wrap it all up here, we've already, the question was, how do we combat the left? We've talked about adopting a Democrat. Are there other things perhaps we can do? Yeah, you got to do everything. That's what liberals do. Liberals use everything. And by the way, so did Hitler. Used everything. The chess club became a Nazi club. All right, that's what Democrats do. Is every single organization becomes a Democratic Party and a leftist machine. Whether it's the National Organization for Women, they don't care about women. All right, what we have to do is at every single turn, and again, I don't want to talk about the macro, about how to take these organizations back, but I'll give you an example of a micro that you can do. Whenever I'm online at the supermarket, I turn to the person behind me and say, can you believe the prices? Beef cost this before Barack Obama was president. Can you believe? Wow. That's great. Every time I'm online at the DMV, I turn to somebody and I say, you think this is bad? Wait till they get a hold of your health care. Yeah, I've said that. Take every opportunity to plant the seed and then take every opportunity to water it. And it's such a fundamental and obvious thing, but we never actually think about how easy this is. Again, I said this earlier. If we all change just one person, we double our numbers. All right, so commit to changing one person, and then you'll change another and another and another, I promise. Guys, thank you so very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Evan Sayet.